Maria Elena pushed her cleaning cart down the long hallway. The wheels made a soft, squeaking sound on the polished floor. It was 10 o'clock at night, and the Whitmore Academy of Music was empty and quiet. All the students had gone home hours ago. Only the security guard and Maria were in the building now. She had been working at the academy for 3 years. Every night she came to clean the classrooms, practice rooms, and concert halls. Maria was 45 years old and had thick black hair that she always kept in a tight bun. Her hands were rough from years of hard work. She wore a simple gray uniform and comfortable shoes that made no sound when she walked. Maria liked working. At night, during the day, the academy was full of rich students and important teachers. They barely looked at her when she passed by. To them, she was just the cleaning lady. Someone who emptied trash cans and mopped floors. Someone who did not matter, but Maria did not mind being invisible. She had learned long ago that it was easier to be quiet and stay out of the way. She spoke English, but not perfectly. Sometimes people made faces when they heard her accent. Sometimes they talked to her slowly, like she was stupid. So Maria said as little as possible. She pushed her cart into the first practice room. It was small, with white walls and a window that looked out onto the garden. In the center of the room sat a black piano. Maria had cleaned this room hundreds of times, but she always paused when she saw the piano. The piano was beautiful. Its surface was so shiny that Maria could see her reflection in it. The keys were white and black, perfectly clean and straight. Maria knew that during the day, students sat here and played music. She could sometimes hear them when she worked. In nearby rooms during her weekend shifts, Maria began to dust the piano bench. She was always very careful with the musical instruments. She used a soft cloth and moved slowly. The academy had expensive equipment, and Maria knew she could never afford to replace anything if she broke a dot as she cleaned. Maria remembered things she tried not to think about. She remembered another piano, far away and long ago. She remembered small fingers moving across keys, playing songs that made people smile. She remembered a teacher who said she was special, that she had a gift, but that was a different life. That was before everything changed. Maria finished cleaning the practice room and moved to the next one. This room was bigger and had 2 pianos. On the walls were pictures of famous musicians. Maria recognized some of them. Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin. She had learned about them when she was young, in a different country, in a different time. She cleaned the pianos carefully, running her cloth over every surface. Sometimes, when she was sure no one was around, Maria would press one key very softly. The sound was beautiful, even just one note, but she never played more than that. She was too afraid someone might hear. The third practice room had a grand piano. It was much larger than the others, with a top that opened like a giant black wing. This was the most expensive instrument in the academy. Maria had heard students talk about how much it cost. More money than she would make in 10 years. Maria remembered the first time she saw this piano. She had stood in the doorway, unable to move. It looked exactly like the piano she used to play. The same shape, the same size, the same way the light reflected off its surface. For a moment she had forgotten where she was. She had taken a step forward, her hands reaching out. Then the security guard had found her. He asked what she was doing. Maria quickly picked up her cleaning supplies and said she was just working. The guard watched her suspiciously for the rest of that night. Now, Maria was more careful. She cleaned the grand piano quickly and did not look at it too long. But sometimes when she polished its surface, she could almost feel the music inside it, waiting to come out. After the practice rooms, Maria went to clean the main concert hall. This was her favorite part of the job, even though it was also the hardest. The hall was huge, with hundreds of red seats facing a stage. On the stage was the most beautiful piano Maria had ever seen. The concert hall piano was different from all the others. It seemed to glow under the stage lights. Maria had watched from the balcony during her weekend shifts when students gave concerts. The music that came from that piano was like magic. It filled the entire hall and made Maria feel things she had almost forgotten. Maria started cleaning the seats. She wiped each one carefully, removing dust and programs left behind from the last concert. As she worked, she let herself imagine what it would feel like to sit at that piano on stage. What it would feel like to have hundreds of people listening to her play, but then she shook her head. Those were foolish thoughts. She was just a cleaning lady now. She had been a cleaning lady for 20 years. That other life, the life with music, was gone forever. Maria finished the seats and moved to the stage. She was not supposed to go on the stage during the week, only on weekends when she did the deep cleaning. But sometimes, when she was very tired and the building was very quiet, she would walk to the edge of the stage and look out at the empty seats. Tonight was one of those nights. Maria stood at the side of the stage and looked out into the dark hall. She imagined it full of people in beautiful clothes waiting to hear music. She imagined herself not in a gray uniform but in an elegant dress, walking to the piano with confidence. For just a moment, Maria let herself remember how it felt to play, the way her fingers knew exactly where to go, the way the music flowed through her like water, the way people looked at her with respect and admiration, not like she was invisible, but the memory hurt too much. Maria quickly finished her work and pushed her cart out of the hall. She had other rooms to clean and she needed to finish before morning. The next part of her route took her past the teachers' offices. Most were dark, but one had a light on. Through the open door, Maria could see Professor Williams working late, grading papers. She knew he taught piano to the advanced students. Professor Williams was one of the few people at the academy who was kind to Maria. He always said hello when he saw her, and he spoke to her like she was a real person, not just a cleaning lady. Sometimes he even asked about her family. Tonight he looked up when Maria passed by. "Good evening, Maria," he said with a smile. "Working hard as always." "Good evening, Professor," Maria replied quietly. She wanted to say more, but she never knew what to say to such important people. As Maria continued down the hallway, she heard music coming from Professor Williams' office. He was playing something on a small keyboard. The melody was sad and beautiful. Maria stopped for a moment to listen, her eyes closed. The music reminded her of home. Not the home she had now, in a small apartment with noisy neighbors, but her real home. The home where music lived in every room, where pianos were not just furniture but friends, where her talent was not a secret she had to hide. Maria opened her eyes and kept walking. She had work to do, and the night was not getting any younger. By 6 in the morning, every room needed to be perfect for the students and teachers who would arrive soon after. But as she worked, the melody Professor Williams had been playing stayed in her head. It followed her from room to room, reminding her of who she used to be and making her wonder if that person was still inside her somewhere, waiting to be found again. 3 weeks later, the Whitmore Academy was preparing for its biggest event of the year. The annual Donor Gala was tomorrow night, and everyone was rushing to make everything perfect. Maria had been asked to work extra hours to help get ready. During the day, Maria watched as workers brought in fancy decorations. They hung golden lights from the ceiling and placed white flowers on every table. The main concert hall was being transformed into an elegant dining room. Round tables with crisp white tablecloths filled the space where the audience seats usually were. Maria had never seen the academy look so beautiful. She felt nervous about working during the gala. Usually she only worked when the building was empty. Tomorrow night it would be full of the richest and most important people in the city. Mrs. Henderson, the academy's event coordinator, found Maria in the hallway. She was a thin woman with sharp eyes who always seemed stressed about something. "Maria," Mrs. Henderson said quickly, "tomorrow night you'll be working during the gala. We need extra staff to keep everything clean. You'll work in the kitchen and help clear tables when needed. Just stay out of the way and be invisible, understand?" Maria nodded. Being invisible was something she knew how to do well. "And Maria," Mrs. Henderson added, "wear your best uniform. This is a very important event. These people donate millions of dollars to the academy. Everything must be perfect." The next evening, Maria arrived at the academy an hour before the gala started. She wore her newest gray uniform and had braided her hair neatly. In the kitchen, she met the other extra workers. Most were from the same cleaning company as Maria. The head chef, a large man named Bruno, explained their duties. You ladies will help serve food and clear dirty dishes. Move quickly and quietly. These rich people don't want to notice you. If they don't see you, you're doing your job right. As 7 o'clock approached, Maria heard cars arriving outside. Through the kitchen window, she could see expensive cars dropping off guests in beautiful evening clothes. The women wore long dresses that sparkled under the lights. The men wore black suits that looked like they cost more than Maria made in a year. The guests began entering the academy. Maria peeked through the kitchen door and watched them walk into the concert hall. They moved with confidence, talking and laughing loudly. These were people who were used to being in important places. People who expected everything to be perfect for them. Maria recognized some faces from newspaper photos. There was the mayor and his wife, the president of the biggest bank in the city, several people who owned large companies. And there, near the front entrance, was Margaret Whitmore III. Margaret Whitmore was the granddaughter of the Academy's founder. She was in her 60s, with silver hair styled perfectly and jewelry that caught the light when she moved. She was on the Academy's board of directors and was known for her strong opinions about everything. Maria had heard the teachers talk about Margaret Whitmore. Some said she was generous with her donations. Others said she was difficult to please and liked to criticize everyone. Tonight, Margaret wore a dark blue dress that probably cost more than Maria's car. As the evening began, Maria and the other workers started serving dinner. Maria carried plates of expensive food to the tables. The guests barely looked at her as she set down their meals. To them, she was just part of the background, like the flowers or the tablecloths. Maria listened to the conversations as she worked. The guests talked about their vacations to Europe, their new houses, and their children's achievements. They complained about politics and bragged about their businesses. None of them seemed to notice or care about the people serving them. After dinner, the main event began. Several Academy students performed on stage. A young violinist played a beautiful piece by Bach. A teenage pianist performed a difficult song by Rachmaninoff. The audience clapped politely, but Maria could tell they were not really paying attention. Many were checking their phones or talking quietly to each other. Maria stood in the back of the hall, holding a tray of empty glasses. She loved listening to the music, even though she had to stay focused on her work. The students were talented, but she could hear small mistakes in their playing, places where they rushed the tempo or missed the emotion of the music. After the performances, the Academy's director, Dr. Harrison, gave a speech about the importance of music education. He thanked the donors for their support and asked for even more money for new programs. The audience clapped, but Maria noticed that many people looked bored. Then Margaret Whitmore stood up to speak. She walked to the microphone with authority, like someone who was used to having people listen to her. "Thank you, Dr. Harrison," Margaret began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "I'm proud to support this academy as my family has for 3 generations. Music education is important, and we must maintain the highest standards." Margaret paused and looked around the room. Her expression grew serious. "However," she continued, "I must say that I'm concerned about the declining quality of today's musicians. When I was young, students practiced harder and cared more about excellence. Today's generation seems to lack dedication." Some people in the audience nodded in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable. Margaret's voice grew louder. "The performance we just heard was adequate, but nothing more. These students play the notes correctly, but where is the passion? Where is the soul? I sometimes think that even our cleaning staff could play with more feeling than some of these young people." Maria felt her face grow hot. Was Margaret talking about her? She tried to make herself smaller, hoping no one would notice her, but Margaret was not finished. She gestured toward the back of the hall, where Maria stood with her tray. "Look at our hard-working cleaning lady there," Margaret said with a laugh. I bet she could sit at that piano and play just as well as the students we just heard. Maybe better because she would play with real emotion, not just technical skill? The audience turned to look at Maria. She wanted to disappear, to run away. But her feet would not move. Everyone was staring at her now, and she could see amusement in their faces. They thought Margaret's comment was funny. Margaret's friend, Mrs. Patterson, laughed loudly. "Oh, Margaret, you're terrible." But you might be right. Sometimes simple people understand music better than those who study it too much. Another woman, Mrs. Blackwell, joined the conversation. "What a delightful idea. We should test your theory, Margaret. Let's have our cleaning lady play something for us." "Oh, yes," Margaret exclaimed, clapping her hands together. What wonderful entertainment that would be. A real person playing real music, not just another boring student recital. The audience began to murmur with excitement. Maria could hear them talking about her like she was not even there. They were treating her like a toy, something to amuse them for a few minutes. Dr. Harrison looked uncomfortable. He clearly did. Not like where this was going, but he could not say no to Margaret Whitmore. She donated too much money to the academy. "Mrs. Whitmore," Dr. Harrison said carefully, "perhaps we should not put our staff in an awkward position." But Margaret waved his concern away. "Nonsense. It will be fun for everyone. I'm sure our cleaning lady would be honored to perform for such a distinguished audience." Margaret walked toward Maria, her high heels clicking on the floor. Her smile was bright but not kind. Maria could see that Margaret thought this was all very amusing. "What's your name, dear?" Margaret asked when she reached Maria. "Maria," she replied quietly, her voice barely audible. "Maria, what a lovely name. Now, Maria, would you like to play the piano for us? Just a simple song, nothing fancy. I'm sure you know something." Maria looked around the hall. Every face was turned toward her. Some people looked curious. Others looked like they were trying not to laugh. All of them were waiting to see what would happen. Maria wanted to say no. She wanted to explain that she was just there to work, not to entertain anyone, but the words would not come out of her mouth. She was trapped by the attention of all these important people. Margaret took Maria's silence as agreement. "Wonderful. Come along, dear. Let's see what you can do." Margaret began walking toward the stage, expecting Maria to follow. The audience was excited now, talking loudly about what was about to happen. Some people were already taking out their phones to record what they expected to be an amusing disaster. Maria set down her tray with shaking hands. She looked toward the kitchen, hoping someone would come and rescue her. But the other workers had disappeared, probably hiding until this embarrassing scene was over. Dr. Harrison approached Maria. "You don't have to do this," he whispered. "I can make an excuse," but Margaret heard him. "Don't be silly, Dr. Harrison. Maria wants to play for us, don't you, Maria? This will be the highlight of our evening." Maria looked up at the stage where the beautiful grand piano sat waiting. The same piano she had dreamed about playing. The same piano she had cleaned and polished so many times. She thought about running away. She thought about pretending to be sick. She thought about all the ways this could go wrong. But something inside her, something that had been sleeping for 20 years, began to wake up. Maybe it was time to stop being invisible. Maybe it was time to show these people that they did not know everything about the world. Maybe it was time to remember who she really was. Maria's legs felt weak as she walked toward the stage. Each step seemed to take forever. The audience watched her every move, and she could hear them whispering to each other. Some were already laughing quietly, expecting to see something amusing. When Maria reached the steps leading up to the stage, she stopped. The piano looked enormous from here. It sat in the center of the stage under bright lights like a beautiful black mountain. Maria had cleaned this piano hundreds of times, but she had never sat at it. She had never even touched its keys. Margaret Whitmore followed close behind her, still smiling her cold smile. "Go on, dear," Margaret said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Don't be shy. We're all friends here." But Maria knew they were not friends. These people saw her as entertainment, like a trained animal in a circus. They wanted to watch her fail so they could laugh and feel superior. Maria climbed the steps slowly. Her cleaning uniform felt wrong on this elegant stage. She belonged in the back rooms, in the shadows, not here under the bright lights where everyone could see her. The piano bench looked like it was made for someone else. Someone in a beautiful dress, someone with soft hands and expensive jewelry. Not someone like Maria, with her rough fingers and tired eyes. Maria sat down carefully on the edge of the bench. The audience fell quiet, waiting to see what would happen. Margaret stood nearby, arms crossed, looking very pleased with herself. "Take your time, Maria," Margaret said in a voice that sounded sweet but was not kind. "Play anything you like. I'm sure whatever you choose will be interesting." Maria looked down at the piano keys. They were perfect, white and black in the pattern she had known since she was a child. For a moment she forgot about the audience. She forgot about Margaret's cruel smile. She forgot about everything except the memory of other keys, long ago. And far away, she remembered being 7 years old, reaching up to touch the keys of her grandmother's old piano. She remembered her first teacher, Mr. Petrov, who had been so patient with her small hands. She remembered the feeling of discovering that she could make beautiful sounds come from this instrument, but that was a different person. That was a little girl who had dreams and talent and hope. That person was gone. Maria placed her hands on the keys but did not press them. Her hands were shaking. She could feel the audience growing impatient behind her. Someone coughed. Someone else whispered something that made other people giggle. "We're waiting, dear," Margaret said, her voice sharper now. "Surely you know one." "Little song?" Maria tried to think of something simple to play. Maybe a children's song that everyone would recognize? Something short that would end this embarrassment quickly. But her mind was blank. The pressure of all those eyes watching her had made her forget everything she had ever known about music. She pressed one key gently. The note rang out clear and pure in the silent hall. It was a beautiful sound, but it seemed to mock her. One note was all she could manage. Some people in the audience started to murmur. Maria heard someone say, "This is taking too long." Another person said, "Maybe this wasn't such a good idea." But Margaret was not ready to give up. "Come now, Maria, one note isn't a song." "Surely you can do better than that." Maria felt trapped. She could not get up and leave now. That would be even more humiliating. But she also could not seem to make her hands work properly. 20 years of hiding her musical ability had made her forget how to access it. She closed her eyes and tried to remember a simple piece. Something from her childhood lessons. Slowly, a melody came back to her. It was a piece by Chopin that Mr. Petrov had taught her when she was 12. Not too difficult, but beautiful, but as soon as she thought about playing Chopin, Maria realized her mistake. That was not simple music. That was not what these people expected from a cleaning lady. They wanted her to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, or some other elementary song. If she played Chopin well, they would know that she was not what she seemed. If she played it badly, they would laugh at her for trying something beyond her ability. Either way, she would lose. Maria opened her eyes and looked out at the audience. Margaret was still standing there with her arms crossed, waiting. The other guests were getting restless. Some were checking their phones. Others were talking quietly among themselves, already bored with the show. Then Maria saw Dr. Harrison in the front row. Unlike the others, he was not smiling or looking amused. He looked worried and sorry. When their eyes met, he nodded slightly, as if to encourage her. Professor Williams was there too, the kind teacher who always said hello to her in the hallways. He was not laughing either. He looked curious, like he was really listening. Maria realized that not everyone in the audience was cruel like Margaret. Some were just following along with what was happening. Maybe, if she could show them something real, something true, they would see her differently. She thought about all the nights she had spent cleaning this academy. All the times she had listened to students practice and heard their mistakes. All the times she had stood in the doorway of practice rooms, remembering what it felt like to make music. She thought about the piano in her childhood home, and how her father had saved for 2 years to buy it for her. She thought about her mother, who had been so proud when Maria won her first competition. She thought about all the dreams that had died when her world fell apart, but maybe those dreams were not completely dead. Maybe they were just sleeping, waiting for the right moment to wake up. Maria adjusted her position on the bench. She straightened her back and placed her hands properly on the keys. She could feel the audience's attention focus on her again. The whispering stopped. She decided to start with something simple after all. Not a children's song, but a gentle piece by Bach that she had loved as a student. It was elegant but not too complex. Beautiful but not showing off. Maria took a deep breath and began to play. The first notes were hesitant and soft. Her fingers felt stiff after so many years away from the piano. But as she continued, muscle memory began to take over. Her hands remembered where it could go. Her fingers found their old flexibility. The melody was sweet and peaceful. It filled the concert hall with gentle music that made people stop talking and really listen. Maria felt some of her nervousness fade away as she concentrated on the notes, but even as she played, she could feel Margaret's disapproval. This was not what Margaret had wanted. Margaret had wanted Maria to embarrass herself, to prove that cleaning ladies should stick to cleaning. Instead, Maria was playing actual music, and playing it well. As the Bach piece continued, Maria felt her confidence growing. Her hands were remembering how to move across the keys. Her ears were remembering how to hear the music, not just the individual notes. She was remembering what it felt like to be a musician. The audience was completely quiet now. Even the people who had been checking their phones were paying attention. The music was too beautiful to ignore. When Maria finished the Bach piece, there was a moment of silence. Then scattered applause began. Not the polite, automatic clapping they had given to the student performers earlier, but genuine appreciation. Margaret's face had changed. She no longer looked amused. She looked surprised and a little angry, like Maria had broken the rules of their game. "Well," Margaret said, her voice tight, "that was adequate. You clearly have had some musical training." But Maria was not listening to Margaret anymore. Playing the piano again had awakened something inside her that had been sleeping for too long. She could feel the music flowing through her, demanding to be heard. Without thinking, Maria began to play again. This time she chose the Chopin piece she had remembered earlier, the Ballade No. 1 in G minor. It was a piece full of passion and pain, a piece that told a story of struggle and triumph. As her fingers found the familiar patterns, Maria forgot about the audience. She forgot about Margaret's cruel game. She forgot about being a cleaning lady in a gray uniform. She was just Maria, playing the piano, telling her story through music. The Chopin piece was much more difficult than the Bach. It required technical skill and emotional depth. It was music that demanded everything from the performer. And Maria gave it everything she had got as she played. Tears began to run down her face. All the sadness she had carried for 20 years poured out through her fingers. All the lost dreams, all the silent nights, all the music that had been trapped inside her heart. The audience sat in stunned silence. This was not what any of them had expected to hear from the woman who cleaned their academy. The Chopin Ballade flowed from Maria's fingers like water from a broken dam. 20 years of silence were ending in this moment. Every note carried the weight of her hidden dreams, her lost homeland, and her buried identity, the music told her. Story better than words ever could. The gentle opening melody spoke of her childhood, when music was joy and possibility. The dramatic middle section thundered with the chaos of war, the terror of running, the grief of losing everything. And the final movement sang of survival, of dignity maintained even in the darkest times. Maria's technique was not perfect after so many years away from the piano. Her fingers sometimes fumbled on the most difficult passages. But what came through? Her playing was something far more valuable than technical perfection. It was raw emotion, honest and powerful. The audience had never heard anything like it. They were used to polished student performances that were technically correct but emotionally empty. This was different. This was music that came from the soul. Mrs. Patterson, who had been laughing earlier, now sat with her mouth open in shock. The mayor had stopped checking his phone and was leaning forward in his chair. Even the waiters and kitchen staff had gathered at the edges of the hall to listen. Margaret Whitmore stood frozen beside the piano. Her plan to humiliate Maria had completely backfired. Instead of proving that the cleaning lady was beneath them, Maria was proving that she possessed something most of the audience had never experienced. True musical genius. As Maria played the most challenging passage of the ballade, her years of hidden practice revealed themselves. During all those nights alone in her apartment, she had played silent piano on her kitchen table. She had practiced fingerings and memorized scores she found in the Academy's music library. Her love for music had never died. It had only been forced underground. The technical demands of the Chopin piece were enormous. Rapid scales, complex harmonies, and dramatic dynamic changes that required both power and delicacy. Maria's hands moved with increasing confidence as the muscle memory of decades of training returned to her. Dr. Harrison sat in amazement. He had run this academy for 15 years and had heard thousands of performances, but he had never heard anyone play with such emotional intensity. The cleaning lady, who had worked invisibly in his building for 3 years, was revealing herself to be a musician of extraordinary ability. Professor Williams recognized something else in Maria's playing. He heard the mark of serious classical training. This was not someone who had learned a few pieces by ear. This was someone who had been taught by masters, someone who had studied music at the highest level. The ballade reached its climactic moment, where all the themes came together in a powerful statement of triumph over adversity. Maria's whole body was involved in the music now. Her shoulders swayed with the rhythm, her head moved with the melodic lines, and her face showed every emotion the music expressed. Young Timothy Chun, a scholarship student who worked part-time in the Academy office, had never heard his teacher Chopin played like this. He studied piano himself and knew how difficult this piece was. But Maria was playing it like she had composed it herself, like every note came directly from her heart. The audience was completely silent except for the sound of the piano. Some people were crying without realizing it. Others sat with their eyes closed, lost in the beauty of the music. A few were recording on their phones, instinctively knowing they were witnessing something remarkable. Mrs. Blackwell, who had earlier suggested this performance as entertainment, now felt deeply ashamed. She had expected to laugh at a simple woman struggling with a children's song. Instead, she was hearing one of the most moving musical experiences of her life. As the ballade moved toward its conclusion, Maria's playing became even more passionate. The final section was like a conversation between hope and despair, with hope ultimately winning. Her left hand provided a foundation of strength, while her right hand soared with melodies that seemed to touch the ceiling of the concert hall. The security guard, who had been watching from the back of the hall, had worked at the Academy for 10 years. He had heard countless concerts and recitals, but he had never seen an audience so completely captivated. Everyone was holding their breath, afraid to make any sound that might disturb the magic happening on stage. Maria approached the final measures of the piece. These were the most technically demanding moments, requiring perfect coordination between both hands and precise control of dynamics. After 20 years away from serious piano playing, this was the ultimate test. Her left hand played a series of powerful bass notes, while her right hand executed a cascade of brilliant scales. The two hands worked together to create a wall of sound that filled every corner of the hall. Maria's face showed the strain of the technical challenge, but also the joy of making music at this level again. The last page of the ballade contained Chopin's greatest musical ideas compressed into a few measures. Maria played each phrase with complete understanding of its meaning. She had lived long enough and suffered enough to truly comprehend what the composer was trying to express. Mrs. Henderson, the event coordinator who had told Maria to stay invisible, watched from the kitchen doorway in complete shock. She realized that she had been working alongside a master musician for 3 years without knowing it. How many other people did she encounter every day without really seeing them? As Maria played the final crescendo, building to the piece's ultimate climax, the energy in the hall was electric. Everyone could feel that something extraordinary was happening. This was not just a piano recital. It was a revelation of human dignity and artistic truth. The young student violinist who had performed earlier in the evening watched Maria with new understanding. She had played her piece correctly, hitting all the right notes at the right times. But Maria was showing her what it really meant to communicate through music. Margaret Whitmore's face had gone through many changes during the performance. Surprise? Anger, confusion, and now something that might have been recognition. She was beginning to understand that her assumptions about people and their worth were deeply flawed. The ballade's final moments required Maria to bring together all the technical and emotional elements she had been building throughout the piece. Her hands moved with certainty across the keys, her foot used the pedals to create exactly the right resonance, and her whole being was focused on communicating the music's deepest truths. Professor Williams recognized that he was witnessing something that happened perhaps once in a decade in the classical music world. A performance so honest and powerful that it reminded everyone present why music mattered. This was why people devoted their lives to this art form. The last chord of the Chopin Ballade rang out through the hall and slowly faded into silence. Maria's hands remained on the keys for a moment, as if she could not believe what had just happened. She had played one of the most difficult pieces in the piano repertoire, and she had played it magnificently. The silence that followed seemed to last forever. No one moved, no one breathed. The audience was still processing what they had just experienced. They had come expecting a polite fundraising dinner with mediocre entertainment. Instead, they had witnessed a musical performance that would change how they thought about art, about people, and about the hidden talents that exist all around them. Then, slowly, the applause began. The applause started with just one person. Professor Williams began clapping slowly, his hands coming together with deliberate respect. The sound echoed in the silent hall like the first drops of rain before a storm. Then Dr. Harrison joined in, rising from his seat as he clapped. His face showed amazement and something else, regret that he had not known about. Maria's talent for the 3 years she had worked at his academy. Within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet. The applause grew louder and more enthusiastic, as people realized they had witnessed something extraordinary. This was not the polite clapping they usually gave to student performances. This was genuine, thunderous appreciation. Maria sat frozen at the piano bench, her hands still resting on the keys. She could not believe what was happening. For 20 years, no one had applauded her music. For 20 years, she had been invisible. Now hundreds of people were standing and clapping for her. Mrs. Patterson, who had suggested this performance as a joke, was crying openly. The music had touched something deep inside her that she had forgotten existed. She realized how cruel she had been, how wrong her assumptions were about people she considered beneath her. The mayor's wife leaned over to her husband and whispered, "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." The mayor nodded, still clapping. He was thinking about all the times he had walked past janitors and cleaning staff in government buildings without really seeing them as people. Timothy Chun, the student who had been taking pictures for the Academy's social media, had recorded the entire performance on his phone. He knew immediately that this video would go viral. The world needed to see what had just happened in this concert hall. Margaret Whitmore stood closest to Maria, but she was not clapping. Her face was red with embarrassment and anger. Her plan to humiliate the cleaning lady had completely failed. Instead, she had been made to look foolish in front of all her wealthy friends, but even Margaret could not deny what she had just heard. The music had been extraordinary. Better than most professional concerts she had attended. Better than anything the Academy students could produce. She had to admit, at least to herself, that she had been completely wrong about Maria. The applause continued for several minutes. People were shouting, "Bravo!" and "Encore!" Some were wiping tears from their eyes. Others were shaking their heads in disbelief. Everyone was talking at once, trying to process what they had experienced. Mrs. Blackwell turned to the woman next to her and said, "I feel so ashamed. We treated her like a circus act, and she's a master musician." The other woman nodded, her own face showing similar regret. Young violinist Sarah Chun, who had performed earlier, felt both inspired and humbled. She had been proud of her technically correct performance, but now she understood the difference between playing notes and making music. Maria had shown her what true artistry looked like. The kitchen staff, who had gathered at the back of the hall, were applauding with tears in their eyes. They knew Maria as a quiet, hard-working colleague. They had no idea she possessed such incredible talent. Rosa, who worked alongside Maria every night, felt proud and happy for her friend. Finally, the applause began to fade. People started sitting down, but their conversations continued buzzing with excitement. Everyone wanted to talk about what they had just witnessed. Dr. Harrison approached the stage. His usual formal demeanor was gone, replaced by genuine emotion. "Maria," he said, his voice carrying through the hall, "that was absolutely magnificent. I had no idea. We had no idea." Maria slowly stood up from the piano bench. Her legs were shaking and she felt dizzy from the rush of emotions. She had poured 20 years of suppressed feelings into that performance, and now she felt empty and overwhelmed. Professor Williams joined Dr. Harrison on stage. "Maria," he said gently, "where did you learn to play like that?" "That was professional level. Performance, graduate level even." Maria looked out at all the faces staring at her. These same people who had barely noticed her for 3 years were now hanging on her every word. She felt scared and confused by the sudden attention. I learned long time ago," Maria said quietly, her accent thicker because of her nervousness. "In my country, before ... She could not finish the sentence. The memories were too painful, and there were too many people watching her. Margaret Whitmore finally found her voice. She was trying to save face after her public humiliation. "Well," she said loudly, "this has certainly been ... expected. Perhaps we should return to our evening's program now." But no one was listening to Margaret anymore. The audience was focused entirely on Maria. They wanted to know more about this remarkable woman who had been working invisibly among them. A man in the front row stood up. He was James Mitchell, the music critic for the city's largest newspaper. He attended hundreds of concerts every year and had heard the world's greatest pianists perform. "Excuse me," James called out, "but I must say something. I've been reviewing classical music for 25 years, and what we just heard was extraordinary. This was not amateur playing. This was world-class artistry." His words carried weight with the audience. If James Mitchell said the performance was exceptional, it truly was. People began talking even more excitedly among themselves. Dr. Harrison realized he needed to take control of the situation. "Perhaps," he said, "we could give Maria some space to recover. This has been an emotional evening for everyone." But Maria surprised everyone by speaking up. Her voice was still quiet, but it was stronger now. "I want to say something," she said. The hall fell silent again. Everyone was eager to hear from the woman who had just amazed them all. "For 20 years, Maria began, I clean your building. I see you every day, but you not see me. You think I'm just ... just nobody, just the cleaning lady." Her English was simple, but her meaning was clear. Several people in the audience looked uncomfortable, recognizing themselves in her words. "But I was musician before I was cleaning lady," Maria continued. "I had dreams, I had talent, I had life full of music. Then everything changed. I lose everything, but I never lose the music inside me." Mrs. Henderson felt ashamed as she remembered telling Maria to stay invisible just that morning. How many times had she walked past Maria without even saying hello? "Tonight you make me play for your entertainment," Maria said, looking directly at Margaret Whitmore. "You think it would be funny to watch simple woman embarrass herself? But music is not joke. Music is my soul." The audience was completely silent. Maria's simple words were more powerful than any formal speech. "I do not play for your amusement," Maria concluded. "I play because music is who I am." It always was, even when I could not show you. When Maria finished speaking, the applause began again, but this time it was different. It was not just appreciation for her musical skill. It was recognition of her dignity, her strength, and her courage. Young Timothy Chun was already posting clips of the performance on social media. Within minutes, people were sharing the videos and commenting on the amazing story. #CleaningLadyPianist began trending on multiple platforms. Professor Williams approached Maria again. Would you be willing to talk privately with Dr. Harrison and myself? We would very much like to learn more about your musical background. Maria nodded, still overwhelmed by everything that had happened. She looked out at the audience one more time. These people who had ignored her for years were now looking at her with respect and admiration. Margaret Whitmore gathered her purse and prepared to leave early. She could not stand being part of a story where she was clearly the villain. As she walked toward the exit, several people stopped her to express their displeasure with how she had treated Maria, the evening that was supposed to end with polite donations and forgotten performances had become something completely different. It had become a lesson about human dignity, hidden talents, and the danger of judging people by their appearances. As the crowd slowly began to disperse, many people approached Maria to thank her personally. Some apologized for not recognizing her worth earlier. Others simply wanted to shake the hand of someone who had given them such a beautiful gift. Maria Elena, the invisible cleaning lady, was invisible no more. 3 days after the gala, Maria sat in Dr. Harrison's office with Professor Williams and a translator named Elena Vasquez. Maria had been too nervous to tell her full story in English, so Dr. Harrison had arranged for someone who spoke her native language to help. The office felt strange to Maria. She had cleaned it many times, dusting the bookshelves and emptying the trash. But she had never sat in one of the comfortable chairs across from Dr. Harrison's desk. She had never been invited to speak as an equal. Dr. Harrison poured tea for everyone and sat down with a notepad. Maria, he said gently, we would very much like to hear your story, only if you're comfortable sharing it. Maria looked at Elena, the translator, who smiled encouragingly. Take your time, Elena said in Maria's language. These people want to understand and help, not judge. Maria took a deep breath and began to speak. Elena translated her words carefully, making sure nothing was lost in translation. I was born in a small country in Eastern Europe, Maria began. My father was a music teacher at the local school. My mother worked at the library. We were not rich, but we had enough. She paused, remembering her childhood home. When I was 5 years old, my grandmother gave me her old piano. It was not beautiful like the pianos here, but it had a good sound. My father started teaching me to play. Professor Williams leaned forward with interest. How quickly did you learn? Very fast, Maria replied through Elena. My father said I had natural talent. By the time I was 8, I was playing pieces that most teenagers could not play. Maria's voice grew stronger as she remembered those early years. When I was 10, my father took me to the capital city to audition for the National Conservatory. It was a big honor. Only the best young musicians were accepted. Dr. Harrison was taking notes. And were you accepted? Yes, Maria said with a small smile. I was the youngest student they had ever admitted. I moved to the capital to study. My teacher there was Professor Dmitry Petrov. He was very famous in our country. Professor Williams recognized the name. Petrov, I know of him. He studied with some of the great Russian masters. You were incredibly fortunate to work with him. Maria nodded. Professor Petrov said I could become a concert pianist. He arranged for me to study with guest teachers from Moscow and Vienna. I practiced 8 hours every day. I loved it so much that it never felt like work. She was quiet for a moment, lost in memories of those intense but happy years. When I was 16, I won the National Young Artist Competition. The prize was a scholarship to study in Paris for 1 year. I was going to work with some of the greatest piano teachers in Europe. Dr. Harrison could see where the story was heading, and his expression grew sad. But something happened to change that. Maria's face darkened. The war started just before I was supposed to leave for Paris. At first, we thought it would be over quickly. But it got worse and worse. The conservatory closed. Students went home to be with their families. Elena continued translating as Maria's voice became more emotional. I went back to my hometown. We thought we would be safe there, away from the big cities. But the fighting came to us too. One day, soldiers came to our street. They said everyone had to leave immediately. We could only take what we could carry. Maria wiped tears from her eyes. The memories were still painful after all these years. My father wanted to take some of his music books. My mother packed food and warm clothes. But I wanted to take my piano music, all my sheet music from the conservatory. My father said there was no room, but I did not listen. She smiled sadly. I was 18 and stubborn. I thought my music was the most important thing in the world. But when we were running to the trucks, carrying our bags, soldiers started shooting. We had to drop everything and just run. Professor Williams handed Maria a tissue. I'm so sorry. That must have been terrifying. We ran into the forest, Maria continued. We could hear our house burning behind us. Everything was gone. My piano, my music, my whole life. Dr. Harrison poured more tea and waited patiently for Maria to continue when she was ready. We lived in refugee camps for 3 years, Maria said. Terrible places with not enough food, not enough heat, too many people. There were no pianos in the camps. Sometimes I would practice fingerings on a piece of wood, trying to remember my pieces. Elena's voice reflected Maria's sadness as she translated. My father got sick in the camps. There were not enough doctors, not enough medicine. He died in the 2nd year. Before he died, he made me promise to keep playing piano if I ever could. Again, he said my talent was a gift that should not be wasted. The room was very quiet. Dr. Harrison and Professor Williams were both moved by Maria's story. After my father died, I stopped practicing, even on the piece of wood. The music hurt too much. It reminded me of everything I had lost. Maria paused to drink some tea and compose herself. When I was 21, we finally got permission to come to America. My mother and I came together. We spoke no English. We had no money. We had no friends here. How did you survive? Dr. Harrison asked. Gently, we took any work we could find. I cleaned offices at night. My mother worked in a factory during the day. We lived in a tiny apartment with 4 other families. Every day was just about having enough money for food. Maria's voice became stronger again. After 2 years, my mother also got sick. The doctors here were good, but the cancer was too strong. Before she died, she reminded me of my promise to my father. Professor Williams could see the pain in Maria's eyes as she talked about losing both parents. After my mother died, I was alone. I thought about trying to play piano again, but I had no money for lessons or even to rent a piano. I had been away from music for almost 7 years. I thought maybe it was too late. But you did eventually return to music, Dr. Harrison observed. Maria nodded. I got a job cleaning at a music school across town. It was smaller than this academy, but they had practice rooms with pianos. Sometimes when I worked late and everyone was gone, I would sit at a piano and try to remember pieces I used to know. She smiled for the first time since starting her story. It was like meeting an old friend again. My fingers were stiff and I had forgotten many things, but slowly the music came back to me. Elena continued translating as Maria's expression brightened. I started borrowing music books from the school's library. I would photocopy pieces and practice them silently on my kitchen table at home. On weekends, when the school was empty, I would practice on the real pianos. Professor Williams was amazed. You maintained your skills by practicing silently? Not just maintained, Maria said. I got better. I learned pieces I had never played before. Chopin, Liszt, Rachmaninoff. I had so much time to think about the music, to understand it deeply. Dr. Harrison realized something. How long were you at that other music school? 15 years, Maria replied. Then they closed down because of money problems. That is when I came to work here. And you've been practicing secretly all this time? Professor Williams asked. Maria nodded. Every weekend when the academy is empty, I come in early and practice. I know which rooms have the best pianos, which doors do not lock properly. I always clean up perfectly, so no one knows I was there. Dr. Harrison felt ashamed. Maria, you've been working here for 3 years, and we never knew about your background. We never asked about your life before. I learned to be invisible, Maria said simply. Invisible people do not get in trouble. Invisible people keep their jobs. I needed this job to survive. Elena added her own comment. Many immigrants learn to hide their talents and education. People sometimes feel threatened if they know you used to be successful in your home country. Professor Williams had been thinking during Maria's story. Maria, your performance the other night was not just technically excellent. You played with deep musical understanding. That only comes from years of serious study and natural talent. Maria smiled. Professor Petrov used to say that technique without soul is just noise. But soul without technique cannot express itself fully. I have had 20 years to develop my soul. The technique never completely left. Dr. Harrison closed his notepad. Maria, what you've shared with us is extraordinary. Not just your musical ability, but your strength and determination. We owe you an apology for not seeing who you really are. You do not owe me anything, Maria replied. You gave me a job when I needed one. You let me work in a place with beautiful music, even if I could only listen from outside. But Professor Williams shook his head. No, Maria, we owe you much. More than that. And we'd like to discuss how we can make things right? The video of Maria's performance spread across the internet like wildfire. Timothy Chiun's recording from the gala had been shared thousands of times in the first week. News stations picked up the story. Radio shows interviewed people who had been there that night. Maria had no idea how famous she was becoming. She did not use social media and rarely watched television. She continued working her normal shifts, cleaning the academy as she always had. But she noticed that people were treating her differently. Students, who had never spoken to her before, now stopped to say hello. Teachers smiled and asked how she was doing. Even Dr. Harrison made a point of greeting her whenever he saw her in the hallways. Maria, Professor Williams said when he found her cleaning a practice room one Thursday evening, have you seen the news coverage about your performance? Maria shook her head. She was wiping down the piano bench carefully, the same task she had done thousands of times before. You've become quite famous, he continued. People all over the world are watching videos of you playing. They're calling you the hidden maestro and the invisible virtuoso. Maria looked confused. Famous? Why famous? I just played piano. Professor Williams smiled. You didn't just play piano, Maria, you touched people's hearts. Your story is inspiring millions of people who feel invisible in their own lives. The next morning, Dr. Harrison called Maria into his office again. This time, several other people were waiting for her. She recognized Professor Williams and Elena, the translator. But there were also strangers, a well-dressed woman with a briefcase and a man with a camera. Maria, Dr. Harrison said, I'd like you to meet some people who are very interested in your story. This is Jennifer Walsh from the Steinway Musical Foundation, and this is Marcus Rivera from Channel 7 News. Maria felt nervous. She did not like attention from strangers, especially people with cameras. Elena translated as Jennifer Walsh spoke. Maria, the Steinway Foundation supports talented musicians who need help developing their careers. We've heard about your performance and your background. We'd like to offer you some opportunities. What kind of opportunities? Maria asked through Elena. First, Jennifer explained, we'd like to provide you with a piano for your home. A good instrument that you can practice on whenever you want. No more practicing silently on your kitchen table. Maria's eyes widened. She had not owned a real piano since she was 18 years old. Second, Jennifer continued, we'd like to arrange for you to work with a professional coach to help you prepare for public performances. Your natural talent is extraordinary, but there are aspects of concert performance that take practice. Dr. Harrison joined the conversation. Maria, the Academy would also like to make you an offer. We'd like you to join our faculty as a piano instructor. Maria looked shocked. Faculty? But I'm cleaning lady. You can be both, Dr. Harrison said. Or you can choose to teach full-time if you prefer. We have several scholarship students who could benefit from working with someone who understands struggle and hardship. Professor Williams added, Maria, you have something special to offer these young people. You understand that music is not just about technique. You know what it means to fight for your art? The news reporter, Marcus Rivera, had been listening quietly. Now he spoke up. Mrs. Elena, would you be willing to do an interview about your story? People are fascinated by your journey from refugee to virtuoso pianist. Maria felt overwhelmed. 3 weeks ago, she was invisible. Now everyone wanted to talk to her, help her, give her opportunities. It was too much to process. I need time to think, she said through Elena. This is all very very big. Everyone nodded understandingly. Jennifer Walsh left her business card. Take all the time you need, Maria. These opportunities will wait. For you, over the next few days, more offers arrived. Concert halls wanted to book her for performances. Music schools invited her to give master classes. A book publisher asked if she would tell her story in writing, but the most surprising call came on a Saturday morning. Maria was at home, having her morning coffee, when her phone rang. Elena, the translator, was calling. Maria, Elena said excitedly, you're not going to believe this. I just got a call from someone very special who wants to meet you. Who? Maria asked. Margaret Whitmore, Elena replied. She wants to apologize to you personally and discuss something important. Maria was quiet. She had not spoken to Margaret since the night of the gala. She had heard that Margaret left the event early and had been very embarrassed by what happened. She says it's important, Elena continued. She wants to meet with you privately, with me translating. She has a proposal. Maria agreed to meet, mostly because she was curious. They arranged to meet at a quiet cafe downtown the next afternoon. Margaret looked different when Maria saw her. Less formal, less intimidating. She wore simple clothes and little jewelry. Her usual confident expression was replaced by something that looked like regret. Maria, Margaret said through Elena, I owe you a sincere apology. My behavior at the gala was inexcusable. I treated you as entertainment, as something less than human. I was wrong, and I'm deeply sorry. Maria listened as Elena translated, but she did not respond immediately. Margaret continued, I've been thinking about that night constantly. I realize that I've spent my whole life making assumptions about people based on their jobs, their clothes, their accents. You've shown me how ignorant and cruel those assumptions can be. Why did you want to meet? Maria asked finally. Margaret took a deep breath. I want to make amends. Not just with words, but with actions. I've been talking to my lawyers and financial advisors about setting up a foundation. Elena translated as Margaret explained her idea. I want to create the Elena Foundation for Hidden Talents, Margaret said. It would provide scholarships and support for immigrants and refugees who have professional skills or artistic abilities that aren't being recognized in their current jobs. Maria was surprised. You want to name it after me? Your story has changed how I see the world, Margaret replied. I want to help other people like you, people whose talents are invisible because of circumstances beyond their control. Margaret pulled out a folder of documents. I'm prepared to donate $5 million to start this foundation. It would help people get the training, instruments, or certifications they need to use their abilities again. Maria sat in silence for several minutes, thinking about Margaret's proposal. Elena waited patiently, understanding that this was a big decision. Why should I trust you? Maria asked finally. 3 weeks ago, you wanted to humiliate me. Margaret nodded. You have every right not to trust me. All I can say is that your music changed something inside me. It made me realize that I've been living my life in a very small, prejudiced way. She leaned forward. Maria, I can't undo what I did to you that night, but maybe I can help prevent it from happening to other people. Maybe I can use my wealth and influence to lift people up instead of putting them down. Maria looked at the legal documents Margaret had brought. She could not read them, but Elena explained that they outlined a serious commitment to helping immigrant artists and professionals. I will think about it, Maria said finally. Meanwhile, the Academy was making changes of its own. Dr. Harrison had been deeply affected by learning about Maria's hidden talent and tragic story. He announced new policies to better support and recognize all Academy employees. Professor Williams worked with Maria to develop a teaching schedule that would allow her to work with scholarship students. These were young people from poor families who had talent but limited resources, much like Maria had been in her youth. The first student Maria taught was a 15-year-old girl named Aina, whose family had immigrated from Central America. Aina's parents worked multiple jobs and could not afford private piano lessons. But Aina had shown remarkable musical ability in her school's music program. She reminds me of myself at that age, Maria told Professor Williams after Aina's first lesson. So much passion, so much potential, but no one to guide her properly. Maria discovered that she loved teaching. Working with young immigrants who faced similar challenges to her own gave her a sense of purpose she had not felt in 20 years. Word spread quickly through the immigrant community about Maria's story and her new teaching position. Parents began bringing their musically gifted children to audition for spots in Maria's classes. Within 2 months, Maria had 15 students. The Academy created a special program called the New Americans Music Initiative to support immigrant and refugee students. The media attention continued, but Maria learned to handle it better. She gave a few carefully selected interviews, always emphasizing the importance of seeing people's full humanity rather than just their current circumstances. Jennifer Walsh from the Steinway Foundation kept her promise. A beautiful grand piano was delivered to Maria's small apartment. For the first time in 27 years, Maria had her own instrument to practice on whenever she wanted. The night the piano arrived, Maria sat down and played for hours. She played the pieces she had memorized as a teenager. She played the music she had learned secretly over the years. And she played new pieces, expressing the joy and hope she felt about her changing life. Her neighbors, who had known her only as the quiet cleaning lady who worked nights. 6 months after the gala that changed everything, Maria stood in the wings of Carnegie Hall in New York City. She wore an elegant black evening gown that had been specially tailored for her. Her hair was styled professionally, and she wore the pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother, the only jewelry she had managed to save from her old life. This was her comeback concert, her return to the world of professional music after 27 years. The proceeds from tonight's performance would benefit the Elena Foundation for Hidden Talents, which Margaret Whitmore had officially established with Maria's blessing. Elena Vasquez, who had become Maria's close friend and manager, stood beside her. "How are you feeling?" Elena asked in their native language. Maria took a deep breath. "Nervous," she admitted, "but also ready. I've been ready for 27 years." Through a gap in the curtains, Maria could see the famous concert hall filling with people. Carnegie Hall seated almost 3,000 people, and tonight it was completely sold out. The audience included music critics, professional musicians, and regular people who had been moved by Maria's story. In the front row sat Dr. Harrison and Professor Williams, who had become like family to Maria. Next to them was Margaret Whitmore, who looked proud and nervous at the same time. Over the past months, Margaret had become one of Maria's strongest supporters, working tirelessly to promote the foundation and help other hidden talents. Also in the front row were Maria's students from the Academy. Aina, the 15-year-old, who had been Maria's first student, was now playing piano at a near-professional level. Several other young immigrants sat nearby, all of them inspired by their teacher's journey. The program for tonight's concert was carefully chosen. Maria would play the same Chopin ballade No, one that had shocked the audience at the Academy Gala. But she would also perform pieces by composers from her homeland, introducing the audience to beautiful music they had probably never heard before. Timothy Chun, who had started all of this by recording Maria's first performance, was now working as a social media manager for the Elena Foundation. He was documenting tonight's concert for the foundation's website and had arranged for the performance to be live-streamed around the world. 5 minutes, Ms. Elena, the stage manager said quietly. Maria walked to the piano that had been placed. Center stage. It was a magnificent Steinway concert grand, the same type of instrument she had dreamed of playing as a young student. She sat down and ran her fingers silently over the keys. Feeling their familiar weight and responsiveness, the last few months had been a whirlwind of change. Maria had officially retired from her cleaning job, though she insisted on finishing out her shifts properly and training her replacement. She had moved to a larger apartment where her new piano fit comfortably. Most importantly, she had begun to rebuild her identity as a musician. Working with the performance coach provided by the Steinway Foundation had been challenging but rewarding. Maria's technique was still excellent, but she had needed to learn how to handle the pressure of performing for large audiences again. She had also needed to overcome 20 years of stage fright and self-doubt. Her first small recital 2 months ago had been at a community center, playing for an audience of 50 people. Even that had felt overwhelming after so many years of playing only in empty rooms. But gradually, with each performance, her confidence had grown. The warm-up concerts had been successful, but tonight was different. Tonight was Carnegie Hall, one of the most prestigious concert venues in the world. Tonight, the entire classical music world was watching to see if the hidden maestro could live up to the extraordinary expectations created by her viral performance. "Ladies and gentlemen," came the announcement over the hall's sound system, "please welcome Maria Elena." Maria walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. The audience was already on their feet before she had played a single note. She bowed gracefully, the way Professor Petrov had taught her when she was 16 years old. As she sat at the piano bench, Maria looked out at the sea of faces. For a moment, she felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. Then she remembered her father's words from long ago. "Music is not about the audience, Maria. Music is about the truth you have to tell." She began with a piece by Enrique Granados, a Spanish composer whose music reminded her of her homeland's folk songs. The melody was warm and nostalgic, telling the story of her childhood and the musical foundation her parents had given her. The audience settled into respectful silence as Maria's playing filled the vast hall. Her technique was flawless, but more importantly, her emotional connection to the music was evident in every phrase. This was not just a piano recital. It was a conversation between Maria and 3,000 listeners. Next, she played a piece by Franz Liszt that demonstrated her technical virtuosity. Her fingers flew across the keys with precision and power, showing that 20 years away from professional performance had not diminished her abilities. If anything, the struggles and experiences of those years had deepened her understanding of the music. During the intermission, Elena checked on Maria backstage. "How does it feel?" Elena asked. "Like coming home," Maria replied simply. "I had forgotten how much I missed this connection with the audience." The second half of the concert began with the piece everyone was waiting for, the Chopin Ballade. No, one that had started Maria's journey back to music. But tonight's performance was even more powerful than the one at the Academy Gala. Maria had spent months studying this piece again, not just technically but emotionally. She understood now that her performance at the gala had been raw and unpolished, driven by years of suppressed emotion. Tonight's performance was refined while maintaining all of that emotional power. As she played the ballade's opening measures, Maria thought about all the people who had helped her reach this moment. Professor Petrov, who had believed in her talent when she was young. Her parents, who had sacrificed so much for her musical education. The refugee camp friends who had encouraged her to keep hope alive. She thought about Dr. Harrison and Professor Williams, who had seen past her cleaning uniform to recognize her worth. She thought about Elena, who had become the sister she never had. She even thought about Margaret Whitmore, who had unknowingly started this whole journey with her cruel challenge. Most of all, She thought about her students at the academy, young people like Aina, who reminded Maria why music mattered. These students were learning not just how to play piano, but how to express their own stories through music. The Chopin Ballade built to its powerful climax, and Maria felt 27 years of silence and suppression pouring out through her fingers. Every note carried the weight of her journey, the loss, the struggle, the hope, and finally the triumph. When the last chord faded away, the hall was silent for several long seconds. Then the audience exploded in the longest standing ovation of Maria's life. People were crying, cheering, and calling for encores. Maria played 3 encore pieces, each one telling a different part of her story. The last was a simple folk song from her homeland that her grandmother had sung to her as a child. She played it softly, intimately, as if she were performing for family in her living room. After the concert, there was a reception where Maria met many of the people who had come to hear her play. Music critics told her it was one of the most moving performances they had ever witnessed. Young musicians asked for advice about pursuing their dreams despite obstacles, but the moment that meant the most to Maria came when Aina, her first student, approached her with tears in her eyes. "Maestra," Aina said, using the Spanish word for teacher, "thank you for showing me that it's possible, that someone like me can make beautiful music and have people listen." Maria hugged the young girl tightly. "Remember," she said, "talent is a gift, but what you do with that gift is your choice. Never let anyone convince you that you are invisible." Later that evening, Maria returned to her apartment with Elena. They sat together drinking tea and looking at the beautiful piano that had become the centerpiece of Maria's new life. "So what happens next?" Elena asked. Maria smiled and walked to the piano. She sat down and began playing softly, a gentle melody that she was composing herself. "Next, I keep making music. I keep teaching my students. I keep showing the world that everyone has value, even if they cannot see it yet." The Elena Foundation had already helped 12 immigrants and refugees return to their professional careers. A doctor from Syria was studying to pass his medical boards. An engineer from Somalia was getting certified to work in American construction. A violinist from Venezuela was preparing for orchestra auditions. Each person who received help from the foundation carried a small card with Maria's words printed on it. "You are not invisible. Your talents matter. Your story deserves to be heard." Margaret Whitmore had become the foundation's most dedicated volunteer, working personally with each recipient to help them navigate the complex process of rebuilding their careers. She often said that Maria had taught her more about human dignity in one evening than she had learned in 60 years of privileged living. The Academy had expanded its New Americans Music Initiative, and Maria now taught 25 students from 15 different countries. Her classes were among the most popular at the school.